Let me ask you something. What if I told you that every single original document of the New Testament, the actual scrolls that people like Matthew, Mark, John, and Paul wrote down, are completely gone, vanished? In this explainer, we're going to dive into one of the most incredible puzzles in all of ancient history, the search for a text that nobody has seen for almost 2,000 years.
So let's just try a little thought experiment. Say you wanted to read the original Gospel of Mark, not a translation, not a copy, but the real deal. What would you even be holding? A fragile papyrus scroll? Maybe an old school leather book, a codex? The truth is, it's really, really complicated. And that complication is exactly what we're here to unpack.
Okay, here's the game plan for our little detective story. First, we're going to bust a huge myth about ancient documents. Then we'll wade through this absolute flood of copies that we do have. After that, we'll have to redefine what an original even means here, look at how scholars piece the text back together, and finally, get to the big question: why should you care about any of this?
So let's jump right into part one, the myth of the original. This is an idea that feels super intuitive to us modern folks. It's where our brains naturally go. But when it comes to ancient texts, it's actually pretty misleading.
We instinctively think of it like an original Rembrandt painting versus a poster you buy in a museum gift shop. The painting is the one, single, authoritative source, straight from the artist. The poster, it's just a reproduction. For a long, long time, people thought of the New Testament this way. There was one perfect original scroll, and everything else was just a copy of it. But that's just not how things worked back then.
And that brings us to the reality of the situation, which is less about one perfect painting and more about a flood of copies. And the truth about what we actually have to work with is frankly pretty shocking. But for scholars, it's also incredibly exciting.
Okay, this right here is the single most important fact you need to know. The number of original author-written manuscripts of the New Testament that have survived to today is 0. A flat 0. Not a single one, not a page, not even a tiny fragment has ever been found. They're all gone. But hold on, this wasn't some grand conspiracy or a massive failure. It was just normal. As the famous biblical scholar Dr. Bart Ehrman says, that's just how antiquity worked. Think about it. They were writing on papyrus, which is perishable. Once a text was copied and sent out, the original had kind of done its job. It was often just discarded, or it literally wore out from being used.
So, that of course begs the question, right? If the originals are all gone, what in the world are scholars looking at? How do we even have a New Testament today?
Well, the answer is we don't have the original, but what we do have is an absolute mountain of copies. We're talking nearly 6,000 manuscripts in the original Greek, over 10,000 more in ancient translations like Latin and Coptic, and on top of that, tens of thousands of quotes from early church leaders writing about the text. For any document from the ancient world, this amount of evidence is just unheard of.
But here's the twist. All these thousands of copies, they don't all say the exact same thing. In fact, there are more documented differences, scholars call them variants, among the manuscripts than there are words in the entire New Testament. Just let that sink in for a second. The Greek New Testament has about 138,000 words. We found over 400,000 variations in the manuscripts. Now, to be clear, most of these are simple spelling mistakes or word order swaps, stuff that doesn't really matter. But some of them are a lot more significant.
And this is where the puzzle gets even deeper, and honestly way more fascinating. Because the more scholars studied all this evidence, the more they started to wonder, was there ever really a single, stable original for some of these books to begin with? Take a few examples. A lot of experts think that the book of 2 Corinthians is actually a few different letters from Paul that an editor stitched together later on. If that's true, there never was a single original scroll. Or what about the famous ending of the Gospel of Mark, the part from verse 9 to 20? The vast majority of scholars agree that was added much later by a scribe. And think about an author like Paul, who dictated his letters. What if his scribe made, say, 5 first copies to send to different churches? Which one of those is the original? What if they had tiny differences right from the start?
All of these complexities have led scholars to kind of shift their goalposts. Instead of this romantic hunt for a single phantom original, the mission now is to reconstruct the earliest attainable text. What does that mean? It means using all the evidence to get as close as humanly possible to what the text looked like right at its origin. It's a subtle change in wording, but it's a huge change in thinking.